If you're in the market for a compact crossover, chances are you've been looking at names like the Ford Escape, the Toyota RAV4, or the Honda CR-V. If you want something nicer, there's always the Audi Q5 or Mercedes-Benz GLK. It should come as no surprise that there are plenty of options because this is, after all, one of the fastest growing segments in the US auto market. Very few automakers don't offer a compact crossover, and this year Porsche is adding its name to the list. Meet the Macan. Porsche is offering two versions of the Macan in the United States, the S and Turbo models. Both come mated exclusively to their 7-speed PDK dual-clutch transmission and with an all-wheel drive system biasing the rear wheels. The Macan S uses a 3-liter mill that makes 340 horsepower and 339 pound-feet of torque. It hits 60 miles an hour in 5.2 seconds, and officially it's rated at 19 miles per gallon on average. Then there's the hotter Macan Turbo. Its engine displaces 3.6 liters and makes a whopping 400 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque. It'll reach the mile-a-minute mark in 4.6 seconds, while it's worth noting that both cars can shave 0.2 seconds off of their 0 to 60 time if you pay for the Sport Chrono package. Shockingly, the Turbo model is rated for the exact same fuel economy as the Macan S. Oh, and pricing? Well, the base Macan S starts at just under 50 grand, but with several options ticked, it's easy to cross the $78,000 mark. Entry for the Macan Turbo comes in at just over $73,000, but as usual, Porsche Extras ain't cheap. Believe it or not, most of the Macan Turbos on hand here for evaluation cost more than $100,000. So what do you get for all that coin? For starters, Porsche offers 8 different wheel options across the model line, including the 21-inch wheels that our test car here has. Also, most of the design elements in the car are meant as a nod to the world-beating 918 Spyder Halo car. Some of the stuff to point out includes a clamshell hood on the front and 3D LED taillights around the back. It's also worth pointing out that the Macan S gets rounded tailpipes while the Turbo model gets squared-off versions, but the best parts about this car are confined to the cabin, so let's go inside and have a look. Base S models come with piano black inserts in the cabin, although you can pay more to get wood, carbon fiber, or this brushed aluminum that our car has here. Now, the base S model also has leather seats with Alcantara inserts, although you can upgrade to 2 different levels of seats, and the ones that we're sitting in right now are the absolute best. They have 18-way adjustability, the leather is absolutely supreme, and I gotta tell you, I think that these are probably some of the nicest seats on the market in general. Like the hood and the taillights, the steering wheel is yet another nod to the 918 Spyder. It has split spokes, and unlike some other Porsche models, you actually get functional buttons to control things like volume, cell phone, and telematics that you get on the right-hand side beside the tack. Now, unfortunately, Porsche's spec sheet doesn't have official numbers for legroom, but having sat back there and being a pretty short guy myself, I can tell you there's not a lot of space. Mind you, the same doesn't go for headroom. There's plenty of that. And while we're on the subject of space, you get roughly 18 cubic feet with the rear seats up, or about 53 with them folded down. And by the way, you get a 40-20-40 split, so if you're doing something like snowboarding, for example, you can lay down the middle and put the skis or the snowboard right through the center. It's also worth mentioning that it doesn't matter which model you pick, either the S or the Turbo, Porsche doesn't restrict which options you can choose. So aside from the engine and larger brakes on the front and rear, really, you can actually option out either car to have exactly the same premium features regardless of which one you pick. Just like its Cayenne big brother, the Macan is unbelievably comfortable on highway stints. I mean, the cabin is so well isolated, it's so quiet that it's almost a little bit too easy to speed. You can get adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist, and also blind spot monitoring, all of which make highway driving a lot less stressful. And even if you don't have the adaptive cruise control currently active, as long as the car's outfitted with it, it can actually apply the brakes and preload them if it senses that the car ahead of you is starting to slow down and you haven't noticed that. If you don't respond with the brakes, or at least not even enough, the car can actually apply full braking to slow you down and at least lessen the impact of the crash. Now, as much as this is a different car than the Cayenne in so many different ways, the comparisons are inevitable because Porsche SUV. So just a couple of bullet points. You actually sit lower, or you're capable of sitting lower in the Macan than you are in the Cayenne. Ground clearance isn't quite as good in this car, but with the optional air suspension, you do get all the way up to 9.06 inches of ground clearance when you have it in high mode. The standard equipment list for the Macan includes summer performance tires, although all seasons are optional, and you have a wide range of wheels. Regardless of that, if you go with the 20-inch or the 21s, you get rear tires that measure 295 millimeters wide, and that, as much as anything else, is a hint at the fact that Porsche really wants to make this a sporty car to drive. Luckily, we spent most of the day driving at Willow Springs outside of LA to test whether or not that really is in fact the case. One of the coolest things about this car is the all-wheel drive system. It's rear biased, but Porsche says that it's capable of sending almost all of the power to the front axle if you need it. Now, like other Porsche cars, this car is available with a Torque Vectoring Plus package, and what that means is it can actually apply braking over the rear axle to the inside rear wheel, and that'll help you rotate better through corners. Now, when you're out on public roads, the Macan S has plenty of power, but when you get to the racetrack, you'll really start to notice that the turbo model is in its element. The engine has a lot more power, and it makes a big difference. On the front and the rear, you get bigger rotors, and that leads to more stopping power. And it's a heavy car no matter how you equip it, so having that extra stopping power makes a difference. Speaking of weight, the model that we're driving right now weighs more than 4,600 pounds, if you can believe it. And when you're taking a hard corner, you really feel a lot of body roll, especially with the steel springs. Now, actually, we have the air suspension in this model, and that does a lot to help reduce the feeling of body roll, but at the same time, there's just no getting around the fact that you're driving a very heavy crossover. Admittedly, the base price of the Macan is entirely unrepresentative of what it can do. But then again, this is Porsche, and you have to expect to spend big money on options with a company like this. And if you're willing to do it, you'll be getting a product that redefines what a compact crossover can be.